Washington's clear-thinking headquarters. The Morning Majority, 5 to 9 on 630 WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham. Coming up next hour, Scott Rasmussen will join us. Also, Britt Hume, Fox News analyst in the 8 o'clock hour. Tony Blankley joins us now. Great conservative columnist, also senior vice president of Edelman PR and author of the book American Grit, and in my opinion, the best dresser in Washington,
He's a sharp-dressed man.
There's no doubt about that. We were just talking about whether or not D.C. was fashion challenged. As a figure skater, Johnny Weir says that we are in D.C. As the best dresser in Washington, D.C., is there anybody who comes close to you? Who do you look at and say, all right, that guy can dress or that girl knows how to dress? Anyone?
There are a lot of people who dress stylishly and a lot who don't. This is not a great town for fashion, obviously.
Right.
It's pretty conservative. Everyone tries to dress safely rather than to their tastes, and it's just fun.
I think that's how the Republicans will play it tonight. I think at the debate, they'll just try and play it safe, right? Do you? I mean,
no, I don't think so.
Really? Okay, well, tell me why.
I think this is. I would expect to see Pawlenty go pretty vigorously after Romney. Newt, my old boss, obviously is going to try to display his métier, which is ideas and debate, and show why there's going to be no substitute for him standing up against the president next year during the general election. Now, I think they're all going to be careful not to slash at each other directly, but I think there's going to be a pretty high level of objectives that at least some of the debaters are going to be bringing in, things they want to accomplish. And I don't. Romney has Pawlenty has generally been sort of picking up the edge on his game in the last week or so, and I think we're going to see a culmination of that tonight. So it'll be interesting to see how Pawlenty's able to he's got such a pleasant personality, to see how he sort of sharpens the tip of that as he tries to put Romney on the defensive in some way.
Tony, you mentioned your old boss, Newt Gingrich.
Yep.
Well, he's very much been in the news of late. I mean, 16 people. Did you notice that, did you? 16 people who were key players in his campaign have abandoned ship. He held a press conference, Newt did, this weekend in Los Angeles, to say his campaign is beginning anew. And, don't pay any attention to the fact that all of these very, very creative campaign folks have left me, because I was never going to run the traditional campaign anyway. Listen, let's be honest. You know this guy better than anybody else out there. Is he done?
I think he's got an uphill battle, but I don't think he's done yet. And this duel with staff, with national consultants, goes back to his days before he was Speaker, when I was with him, and during the Speaker days. He always grumbled. The first fight was with Ed Rollins back before I worked for him in, I think, 1989, when Rollins, who was the head of the National Republican Campaign Committee, wanted to run a nuts and bolts campaign, and Newt wanted to run an ideas-oriented congressional campaign and sweep the nation. Rollins sort of won that debate. Newt eventually was able to run that campaign that he wanted to run in '94. So there's always been a difference between the top professionals in the consulting business.
Well, isn't he sort of counting on a groundswell of support for his ideas? I don't see the groundswell building anywhere, Tony.
No groundswell yet, but he is relaunching now. His view is that the ideas are going to make the difference. That was the difference. Now, we ran a heck of a campaign in '94 on nuts and bolts, but we also were driven by the contract, by our critique of President Clinton at the time. It was probably the strongest idea-based congressional campaign we've seen in living memory. Newt wants to replicate that at the presidential level, and he also thinks, we'll find out, and he admits he doesn't know whether he's right or whether the mainline strategists are right. He thinks that that digital communication, social media, provides an opportunity
to
communicate issues in the way that traditional get-out-the-vote campaigns
But he's an idea guy, Tony. You know as well as I do. And some of the ideas that come across the fertile mind of one Newt Gingrich are bad ideas.
Well, I would phrase it differently. I mean, let's take the issue of Medicare from a few weeks ago. I think that a lot of Republicans, including a lot of the Republican leadership, were nervous about how far to go with supporting the Ryan plan. On the other hand, so I think Newt's idea that we might want to go sort of to where the Alice Rivlin and others were on taking Medicare and making an option of either going to the Ryan alternative or keeping it available for people who want it, was a very plausible policy. What happened was that the rhetoric he used on Meet the Press offended a lot of Republicans. And so it wasn't the idea that was out of step necessarily. I mean, the idea was worth having a good debate over and would have. It was the rhetorical tone that misfired. So I sort of challenged people to identify the bad ideas Newt had. I remember one of the bad ideas Newt had back in the early 90s was that we needed to get laptops to inner city kids because there's a digital divide that was going to create. The middle class kids would be able to be digital and inner city kids wouldn't. That was before the phrase digital divide was invented, and Time magazine and Hillary Clinton, all kind of people laughed at him. Then a few years later, it's become standard policy, and corporations are routinely contributing laptops to inner cities. So I think Newt's ideas tend to be good, but sometimes they're ahead of the time.
Well, obviously this is a strong area for Newt to be in a debate. If you want to make a comeback, that'd be the place to do it.
Yep.
Who else has a chance to sort of break out? We saw Herman Cain won the focus group on that last Fox debate and sort of surprised some people. Who else has a chance to do that?
Well, Santorum, I mean, obviously he's down at very single digits. I know Santorum pretty well. He's a very good debater. He's a smart guy, and he's not going to be modest, I think, in his level of energy tonight. So I would look to see Santorum try to weigh in pretty aggressively. Cain has certainly shown his agreeability and his Tea Party principles. He's going to. I'm not sure whether he's high enough yet to have others take shots at him, but if he is, then he may have to defend on sort of his foreign policy database and that sort of thing. Right. If anyone wants to try to knock him down a peg, it's all going to be different debaters are going to be seeing different targets that they need to nudge to the side, as it were.
I know Santorum is a social conservative, obviously, and I know you spoke at the Ralph Reed's Faith and Freedom Conference recently. How much do you think social issues will play into this nomination process?
My sense is that most social conservatives at this moment are primarily concerned, like everybody else, with the economy and jobs. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a question of them expecting the nominee to lead with the social issues. I do think that we will lower the energy level, and correctly and so, if a non-social conservative is the nominee and he poo-poos or she poo-poos the fundamental importance of values in any presidential campaign. So I think it's more tone and priority and respect that if it's a non-social conservative who gets the nomination has to pay to make sure that the social conservatives turn out at the same level of intensity that they did in the 2010 election. I don't think there's much conflict. There are very few, if any, Republican nominees who disagree. I mean, are there any pro-abortion nominees left? I can't think of any. Yeah. Maybe Giuliani.
Yeah, maybe Giuliani,
Giuliani is on that issue. But it's not a conflict of issues. It's a question of priority and tone. I think Mitch Daniels' statement that we ought to give it a rest, that was the wrong tone. And he probably shouldn't have said it. Not that, I mean, it turns out he's not running. But I think those are the challenges. I think they're manageable challenges for the coalition of conservatives.
All right, Tony. Always great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Tony Blankley, Senior Vice President, Edelman PR, and great conservative columnist here on WMAL.